It's Mozz, it's Chaz, and hey, yay, I want your cray-cray. Hey, hey, I want your AKA Jonescast. Hey, welcome back to the AKA Jonescast. It is me, Charlie, the Professor Esther, and with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey, Mozz, welcome, one and all, to Season 2 of Jessica Jones. First episode, aka Start at the Beginning. Jessica deals with a rival PI and a paranoid would-be client. Trish digs up a medical file that can unlock the mystery of Jessica's powers. Directed by Anna Foster. Writers, of course, Brian Michael Bendis, who created this whole wonderful thing that is Jessica Jones. And, of course, lots of people, all the comic book guys, until we get to, is it all like, let's see here. Okay, Melissa Rosenberg gets our written by credit, and that is it. Everybody else is just, Ruth Atkinson actually, created the character Patricia Patsy Trish Walker back in the day, back in the 60s, before Stan Lee was even a guy. He was just the copy boy. And Ruth Atkinson, uncredited because, sexism. We got John Byrne here, who created Jerry Hogarth, Frank Miller, who created Frank Simpson. As I said, Melissa Rosenberg has the created by credit stuck in there. Roy Thomas actually created the Whizzer.
Hey!
Yeah, well, this is what I'm going to say about this episode. This is very much a fan service episode. They really threw some meat to the nerds in the audience. For those who do not know, the Whizzer is a 1940s superhero.
Wow.
Yeah, he is Marvel's speedster.
Huh.
So while DC had the Flash and other people had everything, Marvel had the Whizzer. And the Whizzer, interestingly enough, so the Whizzer, and this is actually one of these things where there was the Whizzer and there was this character called Ms. America. Back in the 60s, maybe early 70s, they brought the Whizzer and Ms. America back in an Invaders comic book. Because they had started in the 40s and they brought them back. And they had done these stories set in the 40s with Whizzer and Ms. America. Whizzer and Ms. America were originally supposed to be the parents of Quicksilver and Magneto.
Oh, wow.
Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. They later made Magneto the parent.
Interesting.
Yes, but originally that was the idea, and there's actually this whole thing where basically the Wizard says, of course you're my kids. Because I guess they're... both of you be nice. Children.
So was Whizzer always like a pudgy round guy?
No, never. This is a completely new take on it, and this is intended to play with... Basically, it's not even the same name. The actual original Whizzer was named... Let's look it up on Google real quick. We'll get to it in a minute. But, the name they give for the Whizzer, which is Robert... I forget. Let's see here.
I liked him, and he was a charming enough character where I thought he'd be around for a while. I was very surprised.
His actual name is Robert Frank. The original Whizzer was Robert Frank. This Whizzer is named... It's also Robert, but it's a different Robert. It's sort of it's the Will Simpson thing. Frank Simpson, I believe, is the original Nuke, and they named him Will Simpson in this.
I guess sort of letting you know that they're taking a little bit of liberty.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And that's what they're doing here. But it is nice to see. There's another shout out to a very famous Marvel character in this episode, which a lot of people probably missed, which is Tricia Trish Walker talking about is it Melvin or is it Robert Coleman is the wizard in this, played by Jay Clates. But the character I'm referring to is I want to say Malcolm Tybalt, but it's not Malcolm. It's something. But Tybalt is, which we first get a reference to here, is because Trish mentions him on the show, is the hypnotist. That is actually the ringmaster. Now you may recall we actually mentioned the ringmaster back during the Defenders podcast,
right?
Because there was a ringmaster character. That was which is also again where they're playing with these ideas. One of these things that I think Marvel does really well, especially with their TV properties, is they play with the characters and the concepts, so that who a character isn't always who you think it's going to be. Right now, and this may air a little while later. There is a character on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. who is Graviton, but he's actually Colonel Talbot, who is a Hulk villain, but they turned him into Graviton, and they actually matched his look, but it's obviously a completely different character. It's a different universe in which someone else became Graviton. And it's a very interesting way that they work with these things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where they'll take something that is an established character, and they say, yes, but in this universe, this character became that character. And it's really, it's a lot of fun, and that's one of the many things I really love about this show. But let's get actually into the meat of the show. We're opening up with our good hero, Jessica Jones, sort of spying on someone as she's wont to do, to get some dirt on someone. And then, of course, when she presents the dirt to her client basically is like, well, I want you to kill this guy for me. Which really, not for nothing, is kind of 0 to 60 right there.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot to take in there. And not for nothing, Jessica isn't having any of this. You know, and she makes a great line there where she says, look, if I was a superhero, I'd have you arrested. If I was a vigilante, I'd just kill you myself. So which am I? And really puts the fear of
the vigilante.
Yeah, into this woman. I don't know. What did you think about this episode, Mozz?
I dug it a lot. I mean, it's introducing sort of the same premise as last time. She gets a weird client or a weird visit from somebody. There's an invisible hand behind it, and that guy, obviously being Chang and Whizzer as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's setting up to be something good. I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was they're really trying to drive home the point in this episode that her drinking is becoming a problem. That I thought was interesting, because last season she was always drunk, but it was never a problem. And I found myself asking myself this question at the beginning of the episode. I was like, is it really that bad? Because she metabolizes the alcohol so fast, and it never really does harm to her body. So what's really so bad about it? And then I thought, it's probably the choices you end up making when you're drunk, and that's probably what her real problem with alcoholism is, and they're really driving that home. So which is kind of interesting to see. The other thing I thought was interesting is, like, this takes place almost immediately after the events of the first season, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, roughly. To be, without a doubt, it takes place shortly after the first season. We definitely see at the end of the first season people calling her and all of this business getting drummed up because she killed the Purple Man. Right. And, I think that there is definitely, I don't know exactly how long she's been doing this. Clearly they've had time to rebuild. Malcolm has had time to ingratiate himself as a member of AKA Alias Investigations.
That's true. I was just thinking, man, what a terrible life for this poor woman. Like, she just got done through doing that. But yeah, I guess it has been a while, but still. Man, it just goes from one storm to another.
What I would say is that this definitely, and for what it's worth, Defenders takes place in between these two seasons. So
Okay.
We had the whole Defenders arc there as well.
Right. She seemed pretty well sorted out during that series. Like she was okay. Here she seems just on a wire, just about to fall off at any minute.
Yeah, although, to speak to addiction, one of the things that I will mention, because I told you this was one of those moments that so hit me about the Defenders series, is when they're on the subway, and Jessica sees the guy who's passed out, who still has like 3 undrunken beers left.
Right.
And she reaches over, takes one of the guy's beers, and drinks it, and everyone looks at her and says, "It's been a hard day," which is a classic alcoholics line. I know, I use it myself all the time. And it is this moment of recognizing the power that these things like alcohol, demon rum, as we used to call it back in the day, has on you. That you are beholden to it. You are addicted. And when you say it, well, her body metabolizes it so quickly. One of the things I think that happens because of that is that she winds up drinking so much more.
Right.
An alcoholic's liver is a curse. Because when you start out drinking, because you have an alcoholic's liver, you process it really well. And so you can drink all night and you're fine, and you're fine, and you're fine. But you keep on trying to drink more to get to that drunken point. Like any addiction, it's about chasing it. And one of the things I think we get in this series is this idea of chasing addiction. One thing that I think is interesting about the Jessica Jones character and the Jessica Jones story arc is not only Jessica Jones's addictions and her obsessions, but everybody else around her. That everybody else around her is an addict as well. And I really think it is very much about the idea. Much in the way that I think that The Punisher was about people who are equally dysfunctional because of a shared experience. People that are trying to make good in their world because of where they've been. I think Jessica Jones comes at it from this idea that there are so many addicts in this world. And here are a group of addicts. And each is sitting in judgment of the other for their addiction.
Right.
Meanwhile, none of them are doing anything to solve their own problems.
You're right. Patsy's no different because she's addicted to her drug of being relevant,
Well, yeah. Well, Pat, and I will admit, I watched ahead. Patsy's arc is so interesting, and there are people that are have really torn Patsy a new one over her arc in this series. I love it. I love what she does and where she goes and her entire plot line because it has a reality to it about someone who was raised in the world she was. And part of that is relevance, part of that is the power of celebrity, but part of it is also just the sense of powerlessness that she feels. And I think maybe if there's something to be taken away from this, it is that everyone feels powerless. Even people with powers. And one thing that we see about the Wizard, because the Wizard is, I think, even though this is his final episode as a living person, I think there's a quality to him that encapsulates what this series' arc is going to be about. Which is this idea that, which is the fact that even with powers, you are powerless. And that powerlessness doesn't come from anything you have, but the fact that there are others with powers or without that are above you. And I think about this in some extent when I think about the gun debates that often happens, and this idea that people fear other people, and so they want to have guns because they fear the government, they fear criminals, they fear whatever they fear. People want to make sure that they have this power, but the power doesn't give them any additional strength, really. It just makes them feel better.
Right.
So gaining powers, like the Wizard has gained powers in this, doesn't make him in any way a success or a better position in his life. He's still a guy, loves his mongoose, which is another reference. The mongoose thing is a whole nerd bit there because, of course, the Wizard gains his power from a green mongoose, which I have, in my own headcanon, have established as a gamma-irradiated mongoose. Because he was bit by a cobra, and they said the tribe that saved him said the only thing that can save your son is to have the blood of a mongoose put into his veins.
Oh,
and
wow.
It must be a green mongoose. And it was very specific. There was this green mongoose in this world. So they catch the green mongoose. They put the green mongoose blood in his veins. So to me, it's always this gamma-irradiated mongoose that gives him his superpowers.
Yeah, why else would he be green?
Well, Well, this is actually before gamma, because again, this is the 1940s. It was a green mongoose just because, colorists back in the day.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But it all circles back around itself. Because, of course, remember the Hulk wasn't originally green. He was originally gray. And they went with green because, that's a way easier color to work with in printing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It is what you basically see as the limitations of a media influencing the artistry that comes after it. There's an interesting idea that the reason why crooners became so popular in early recorded music is because when you were recording on a gramophone, a crooner's voice worked much better than most any other voice.
Huh. Why do you think that was?
Well, because it was powerful and deep and long, so that you could hear it in between the scratches and picks of the gramophone. There was another interesting take on it, which was that T-Pain, who became so popular, as we all know, became popular expressly because the music he was creating was uniquely suited to cell phones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that T-Pain became popular because T-Pain actually made a huge amount of his fame through ringtones. And the limitations of early 21st century ringtones required that they, hit certain mechanical notes, which T-Pain was more than happy to hit. And
how interesting.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting idea, and so that is why both the Hulk and that mongoose was green.
Huh.
And no one has ever tied it into that it would be a gamma-irradiated mongoose, but like I said, that is my own personal fan theory.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it makes sense to me too. That's just why I say it. Anyway, so we get our introduction of the series here. Sorry.
I'm liking this Chang character because he's the exact opposite end of the spectrum from her. He's probably just as good at his job, but he has to do it through discipline and hard work, whereas she's, gifted and ambles her way through everything and still is good enough to get the same results that he's doing.
Well, there's an interesting take on this, and this goes to the missing dog later. As I said, I have watched ahead, so spoilers. There is a dog that comes into play, and the idea that the fact that Chang is good at his job can also get in his way because maybe Chang worries too much is thinking long term in a way that his clients don't want him to. And it gives him this extra caution that a person like Jessica Jones, who is, not for nothing, superpowers aside, just your classic drunk detective. Literature is full of the hard-drinking detective who ambles his way through stories. Columbo, classically, is, though not a hard-drinking detective, is that genre piece. The detective who is not your typical perfection of detective moving forward.
Right. There's an aspect to being good in spite of themselves.
Exactly. And with, of course, Columbo, it's always this question: is the bumbling detective an act, or is it who he really is? And my take on Columbo is always stop. You're both right. That he is kind of a bumbling detective, but at the same time, he also is watching things and putting the pieces together.
Right.
And I think we see with Jessica more often than not, even when we don't see it expressly, that's the point of Jessica, is that she actually is really good at this. She's really good at seeing all the pieces of the puzzle and putting them together. There's an interesting idea within these characters. You know, one of the things I always say about Captain America is that he is actually the smartest person on the earth. They actually make that point in his origin, that he is not only physically the peak of human potential, but he's also mentally the peak of human potential.
Really?
Yeah, and they've actually touch on this every so often in the comic books and whatnot, because they make the point that, you know, like, for example, how Captain America dodges bullets. This is, well, I see the bullet there, and so I move to the side. But it's like he can see the bullet, he can see where it's going to go, and he can see everything that happens. When he throws his shield and it ricochets off of 17 different things and hits its target, it's because he's already done the math. And there was actually this great thing they used to do with this character called Amadeus Cho, who was supposed to be the seventh smartest person in the world. And his whole thing was that you'd always see all these math equations flying around him, and see how if he'd throw this thing, it'd hit that thing, and do this and do that, and it would hit the mark, and that would save the day. And that's great, but that is actually exactly what Captain America does every time he throws his mighty shield.
Right, but it seems to me that it's probably not a calculation as much as it is sort of an intrinsic, instinctive thing that's just there. Like his subconscious does the calculations without him even realizing it. He just sees the visual representation of an action in his mind's eye and is able to get his body to conform to that.
Well, exactly, but the fact of the matter is that's what anyone's doing.
Right.
You know, so when, you know, and this was something I remember hearing years ago, which was that, you know, people never think about the genius that it takes to be a Michael Jordan. That to take a ball and throw it in a randomized situation through a hoop and have it hit, you know, so many percentage of the time. It's something that you could not program the most advanced computer to do that math. That just looking at it, knowing the physics intrinsically, and knowing how to make it fly to that spot is actually a really high level of genius that few people even consider when talking about a guy like Michael Jordan. And the same goes for a guy like Steve Rogers, Captain America. And so this does come up every now and again. And so I think with a character like Jessica Jones, well, she has all these physical superpowers. I think part of that might be also that she has these mental superpowers. There's actually a character called Protocide in the comics that I'm a big fan of. He's only had a couple issues that have been out there, but he's basically this big dumb guy that got the super soldier serum just before Captain America. And he basically dies of a heart attack, but then Hydra brings him back to life because you can do that in the comics. And it's this thing where he is always really quiet. Everyone always says, "Oh, he must be brain damaged because he's always quiet." My own fan theory on Protocide is that no, he's just as smart as everybody else, but he recognizes how smart he just got because he'd been a big dumb guy his whole life. And then one day he got this formula and it upped his intellect, and now he sees all these things and he is constantly doesn't want to talk because he sees all these things going on. And a guy like Steve Rogers, who was already very intelligent, or William Burnside, the 1950s Captain America who eventually went insane, who was a college professor, they all were already super smart. So when they got that boost to that supreme human intelligence, they didn't notice that they got smarter. And so within that concept, to me, I think Jessica Jones got that intellectual upkick too, though she may not notice it because she was so young when she got it, you know. So for her, for most of her life, she's always had this ability to put the two and two together.
Right. I think there is a certain romance to thinking that her skills have been fostered by a very, very tough life as well.
Yeah. Well,
that's really sort of where her street smarts and whatnot come from. The powers are nice, but what really gets her by is her actual skill set.
Yeah, and I think there's a aspect to that as well. It's all about in how you develop it. One of the things I've always said about a guy like Reed Richards, that he is a scientific genius is because he grew up in this wealthy environment. His father was a scientist. He's a scientist. He comes into this world not from nothing, but in this world where this was what his path was laid before him. And same for Tony Stark. And for a guy like Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, becoming the world's smartest man was something of a choice, and that he chose to focus on science and magic to develop this skill. And
so can Dr. Doom kill Thanos? What is that about?
Could Dr. Doom kill Thanos? Well, it depends on which storyline you're watching. In the last Secret Wars, he absolutely does kill Thanos, because Thanos doesn't have the Infinity Gauntlet, and Dr. Doom has the power of a Beyonder. So, yeah. And to be fair, what Dr. Doom is best at is finding where to grab power to seize it and to move himself forward. So whether it's Galactus trying to eat Secret Wars world or stealing powers from Beyonders, Galactus is always, Dr. Doom is always there ready to find cosmic power to move it to himself from whoever has it at the time.
Sounds a lot like Loki.
Oh, he's very much like Loki. Oh, there's so many... Folks, turn into super connectivity. Well, not this week, but like 3 weeks ago. Because I've got so many fan theories about Infinity War right now. It's insane. And listen to Mozz, and again, like I said, 3 weeks ago. Listen to Mozz talking about Infinity War on the Capes and Lunatics podcast, because Mozz has some great ideas about it too. And it's just, there's so much in Infinity War. I mean, honestly, there was a moment and I'm just going to say this for a minute, where Marvel just sort of starts dunking on DC.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, and that is what Infinity War is. It's just literally just like running up the score. Doesn't need to show that they're better, but they're just like, you know what? You're complaining about how hard it is. Let us show you what you can do if you do the hard work and build out your universe.
Right.
And no matter how you slice it, that's the difference between Marvel and DC, is Marvel had really built out its universe. Built a comic book universe across multiple properties, across multiple genres and distribution devices, and built out really... Marvel Cinematic Universe in a way that DC just doesn't have the patience to do.
I'm interested. I keep thinking about what people will say about this time, this stretch of, what's it been, 10 years now? Probably the biggest thing ever done, maybe Star Wars, but other than that, there's never been a connected universe to this level before. And 20 years from now, I wonder what people at Comic-Con will be saying about what we're living through.
Well, to be honest with you, what I can
it's going to be legendary.
Yeah, well, it will be. What I can honestly say is that what Marvel has done in its interconnected universe is something very new. Something that no one else prior to it, the only thing that has actually come close to what Marvel has created is Marvel Comics. And DC Comics as well, honestly. Although I think that DC Comics, even in their comic books, never really embraced what Marvel did. Marvel's central idea was it is all connected. Even if these two characters never meet, they live in the same world. And there's a great scene in Infinity War and a great scene in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that I think both encapsulate this, which is that after Thanos' people come to New York and Tony Stark and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, well, not so much Doctor Strange, because they get Doctor Strange and they run off with him, that as that's all happening, over in Scotland, it's a Tuesday, where Vision and Scarlet Witch are. It's a Tuesday, and on the news, there was some kerfuffle in New York today. We should probably go check that out. Meanwhile, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is over on the West Coast, is like, oh, yeah, you hear about that stuff going on in New York? It's like, yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, we got our own alien invasion we're dealing with right now. You know, and this is this idea within both ideas is that just because something is happening doesn't mean it happens everywhere. And in fact,
But even a gigantic, interstellar event where, half of doesn't that seem like a worldwide problem? But at the end, when he sends a 19 deeper message to Marvel, you're like, okay, but was she not aware of what was happening?
Well, let me tell you a little story. It's in Mostly Harmless, the final book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series.
Okay.
There is this, and it plays out like the first time the aliens land, it's front page news over everything. When the second ship came, it was still a big story, but not quite so big as that first ship. When the third ship came, it's a story on the third page of the first section. It says third spaceship lands in Central Park. This one is pink. Spaceship. But it's this basic idea that once you've established that this is the norm, basically after Avengers, when the sky opens up and the aliens come down, and really possibly after even the Incredible Hulk, when Harlem is destroyed by the Hulk and Abomination. But to a lesser extent, after Avengers, this is just stuff that exists in this world. You have Avengers, and then you have the whole info dump from Captain America: Civil War. Then you have this whole story about this robot that Tony Stark built that tried to blow up this city that was going to destroy the world. Fortunately, the Avengers saved us all. It all piles up, and after a while, it's like, oh, okay, interesting. And
That's interesting. I didn't think about it.
If you're that far away from it, and I think there's maybe even a thing in Infinity War in this, in that idea that spoilers, when Eitri, the dwarf, played by spoilers, Peter Dinklage, so great.
So good.
He makes this point about Nevedalar falling to Thanos, and where it was Asgard. It's like, dude, it's a big galaxy. It's a big galaxy, and this is just one galaxy of one of millions of billions in our amazing and expanding universe.
Yeah, but not just that, but where was Asgard? Where is Asgard?
Asgard is destroyed. That was in Ragnarok.
That's my point. It's like you're asking where were we? We were fighting our own battles that we didn't win. So,
And it does seem that it was like just about a week ago. And interestingly enough, that actually says that the events of Age of Ultron, well, depending on exactly how long that post-credit scene in Age of Ultron takes place after the end of Age of Ultron, when he says, I guess I'll do it myself, that scene takes place about a week ago, seemingly. And about maybe 2 weeks ago is when he gets the gauntlet.
Oh, wow.
Assuming that the gauntlet wasn't already something that existed, and then he had Eitri essentially perfect it, which is another theory that basically the idea of the gauntlet had always been around. That you could make this gauntlet, you could do it, but it took Eitri, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, to actually build it. That this was this idea that it existed for centuries, because we know that Odin had a copy of it in his thing, and so possibly people had been making infinity gauntlets, like slivers of the true cross. Back in the 1700s and 1400s, you just get a sliver of the true cross here, and it was just this idea that you had this idea of something that was omnipotent. And people would make these and sell these. And maybe there was some idea behind it. Maybe there was some truth behind it. But that most of them were just, pathetic fakes. And that what Thanos does is maybe he takes his own model and then he takes it to Eitri and he devised what it will be to actually build it. Because, of course, Eitri, he is your He is your basic, Dr. Von Braun. It's like,
Huh.
not really thinking about, or Oppenheimer, not really thinking about where it's going to go, but just as, man, if I could actually create that, that would be amazing. I could actually build the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah.
Let me try and do that, because that's always the problem with scientists, man. You give them that moment to say, could I build that?
Yeah. In the famous words of Dr. Ian Malcolm, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Exactly. Yeah, or or as Tony Stark said in season 1 of Agent Carter, I have my kind of racist. He says, "What I have my black babies," which are the ideas he comes up with, which are too dangerous to let people know about.
Huh.
Because he builds all these things, like, oh, I could do that. And it's like, oh, you know what? Humanity's not ready for that. Humanity's not ready for that. This is Howard Stark, he's trying to build things, and he's like, oh yeah, I could create a thing that could destroy all life on Earth. Ooh, that's probably not a good thing. I should lock that away. And then the plotline of the first season of Agent Carter is someone steals all of his most dangerous inventions that he isn't selling to the government. And great series, Agent Carter. You should watch it. We need a 3rd season. Okay, getting back to this show that we're actually here to talk about, Mozz. Right.
So Chang shows up at this point, I think. That's where we are, right?
Well, we get to Chang. Well, actually, one thing I want to talk about is, let's talk about, it's Patsy and Patsy Walker doing
that
the kid's
rough.
birthday. Yeah. It is rough on so many levels. Both on the level that it is these two gentlemen, or one gentleman who's a huge Patsy Walker fan.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to say is that Tristan actually is a comic hero fan. I may have introduced him to it, but it's his own love of it. I don't force it on my other son who has a interest and tolerance of it, but he's not Tristan. And this guy is definitely forcing Patsy on his child. But she's there and she sings the song to get the file.
Right, and the kids seem like they could care less.
Well, they're the kids at the kids at the Ghostbusters party in Ghostbusters 2.
Right, right. No, but I mean, it speaks to what you're saying, that she was really more there for the guy than for the kids, because the kids were just running around playing their own games. That could have been anybody.
Exactly. Well, exactly to them, but of course the dad is there,
right?
And he's like, "Yay, it's Patsy! So you want to sing? Hey, I want you cray cray." So we get our new theme song this season, folks. Look it up on YouTube. It's great. And of course, even his husband is like, yeah, he really likes Patsy Walker.
Yeah.
And of course, when he asks her to do the encore, she's like, that wasn't the deal. I sang this song. Give me the freaking file. And she gets the file, and of course, she sees that there's time missing from Jessica's history, which is what I think is the central plot line here, is that IGH, whatever that could stand for. And I'll get to another story.
Garden and Home, I think it was, right?
Is that in this episode that they actually find out? Oh, okay. Yeah, it stands for Industrial Garments and Handling.
Right.
Which I don't know what an industrial garment is, and I don't know how you handle it.
Right.
But
I imagine industrial garments are like suits like the laundry people wear or the janitors wear, that sort of thing.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. There is a company. It's a public relations company called IBW. They're relatively big, and the reason their name is IBW is it stands for Industrial Basket and Wire. And what it is when they used to work for them, and they're actually part of Ogilvy as well. But basically, they wanted to get listed on the stock exchange, and there's two ways you can get listed on the stock exchange. Is you can either, go through all the work to file all the paperwork and actually get your own company listed on the stock exchange, or you can buy another company that's already listed,
Huh.
and then use them to sell your stock. And that is what IBW did. Because they were a public relations firm that bought a company called Industrial Basket and Wire. And they said, yeah, and over in Scotland right now, there's a little factory that makes industrial baskets and wires. Well, we do everything else.
Wow.
And so that is what I think about with IGH. I do wonder, because Ogilvy Public Relations and IBW Ogilvy is actually a fairly big company. I wonder if one of the writers actually at one point worked in that company and heard that story, and that's where they got the idea to call it IGH for industrial garments and handling. And it just shows how there are all these times we'll get a set of initials and not necessarily know what they mean, but you run with it. You run with it because it's the story.
Yeah.
One of the interesting characters we meet in this is Patsy Walker's boyfriend in this. His name, not Oscar, that's Jessica.
He's a fellow anchor, right?
Yeah, Griffin Sinclair, plays by Hal Ozson. And Griffin is, and I'm going to say this right now, I believe Griffin Sinclair is actually Damon Hellstrom.
Who is that again now?
Damon Hellstrom is the guy who is the son of Satan, who Patsy eventually marries and is driven insane by and leads her to suicide by until she comes back from heck.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, the Patsy Walker story is amazingly deep and convoluted. I don't know if we're ever going to get half of that in the Jessica Jones story, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, because, I don't know, he seemed too polished, too nice, and too cool with everything. He seemed like he had an alternative agenda. I didn't trust him.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think he's just the Antichrist, and that's the point. Now, Damon Hellstrom, who is, of course, it's Hellstrom, not Hellstorm, although his superhero name is Hellstorm, but his actual name is Hellstrom. For reasons.
Right. You need reasons.
Yes. But, you know, what's interesting about him is that he is a guy who is as comfortable playing villain as hero.
Huh.
And since we got this shout out to Tybalt in this episode, the Ringmaster, who is the master hypnotist, it makes me wonder if, as we get to season 3 and beyond, we're going to get more of these guys who seem like good guys but are really villains. You know, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But in this episode, man, we have gone way off the rails all over the place. But to get to the central plotline of this is IGH, that Patsy's trying to get Jessica interested in IGH. She is rejecting this because she wants to leave the past in the past. And she gets all these clients coming in, you know, people with sob stories, people with interesting cases with money. And one of the guys is the Wizard. And at one point, in a very manipulative action, Patsy Walker brings the ashes of her family to Jessica to deal with.
Yeah.
And this leads to a moment when the Wizard actually does come to Jessica's office. And she realizes he actually does have superpowers. He actually is the Wizard. He actually has these super speed powers. And during it, her brother gets scattered all over the floor.
Right.
And as she chases him out, as he's trying to tell her, there are people trying to kill me. There are people trying to kill me because I know about this conspiracy.
Right. Now, but once she sees his super speed, why does she not immediately believe his story? Why is she still suspicious of the story? When, you know, probably the most unbelievable part of the story ends up being true. And then secondly, why does he run from her?
Well, I think that there's a lot of aspects to this. One aspect is just the fact that, yes, he has superpowers. That doesn't mean he's sane.
The biggest question to his sanity was the fact that he thought he had superpowers.
Well, not necessarily. The biggest question to his sanity was that he was a disheveled, chubby gentleman who's obsessed with the mongoose, that he has these whole other bags of hammers the way he presents himself that bespeak to mental illness that do not necessarily relate to his powers. Essentially, you can be mentally ill and have superpowers.
Right.
Those are not two precluded conditions. In fact, one could argue that one of the biggest superheroes in this universe, the Hulk, has a whole bag of mental illness problems.
Mm.
And of course Tony Stark has mental illness problems. Everyone has all this mental illness. So just because this guy thinks there's a corporation out to get him doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Although I think once she realizes he does have superpowers, she does understand that, and she's trying to say, is it IGH? Is IGH the people after him? And he's like, I have no idea who that is.
But why doesn't he stop for a second and let her help him? I wonder if, that's the impulse or something that he does that the drug was trying to suppress. Why did he start throwing things at her? It was a very weird departure from a normal behavior, no?
Because I think he actually is very mentally ill.
Oh.
I think that his mental illness, like I said, I think that possibly the powers gave him, exacerbated the mental illness that was there. But the mental illness that was there was already there. And and to give you an idea, it's you can look at it like Trish and her addictions. And I think that's something that maybe we touched on last time with Malcolm, and maybe we'll touch on more this season with Malcolm, which is this idea that he doesn't know where the influences ended and his own addictions began. Mm-hmm. That was who he was all along, and this person just exploited that. That, it's easy to blame this other thing, but really that was always there. And when it comes to a guy like the Wizard, maybe he always was a little bit mentally ill, and then, it comes back and catches him,
Right, the experiment probably exacerbated it.
Exactly. Anyway, so after their big fight, he runs out, and he says there's someone after him, and certainly a bunch of scaffolding falls on him and kills him in a very
much like the air conditioner he was screaming about before.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just like you said, things have been falling. People have been trying to get him, and then they finally do. And it's interesting on a lot of different levels. One level is just the idea that he was right all along. The other level is that I think that because of his super speed, people have needed to up the ante with him. And he gets stuck in this spot where everything gets dropped on him. And I think this is this moment where Jessica is like, I should have listened to him, and I didn't. Because I didn't trust him. And that's where that's where this story sort of ends up,
Well, that I guess sort of propels Jessica to finally confront the demons inside her head, and which is what leads her down to visiting IGH and having some flashbacks and having some recall of her experience. And I think that's where it ends here.
Yeah, and I think that is the point. I think she it is hard for her in this moment as she's dealing with these things, digging through them. She sees, she finds out that, it still has to do with Kozlov, who she met last season, but then she finds it goes much deeper than just Kozlov, and it's interesting. We'll talk about that more next episode of the.
It rings a lot like Stranger Things, like even, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, honestly, there's always Stranger Things coming. One of the things I love about this series is that there is this depth and this breadth to it, and yet it still maintains this human connection of the idea, of ideas that are very human. The idea of addiction, the idea of dependency, the idea of fear and seeking out outcome that helps you out. There's a lot going on in this series, and I'm very excited about this new season of Jessica Jones. Mozz, any final thoughts you want to add to this?
No. I just I'm super excited about where this season's going to go.
Yeah,
it's always been a really well written show and well planned out, and like they have something to say, which is always fun to figure out as the season progresses.
Absolutely, I'm very much inclined to agree. I think this is going to be a great series, a great season. Definitely will be better than Iron Fist and the Defenders. We're going to try and hammer these all out so that we can actually do Luke Cage in June, or is it June, in real time, but we'll see how that all plays out. But anyway, Mozz, if people would like to reach out to you and talk to you about Jessica Jones or anything else, how can they find you?
Oh, they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And, of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way the way our Mozz and Paz once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, follow me on Twitter to live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is getting awesome right now. 3 weeks ago, when you hear this, at Charlie Esser, that's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for equality. And thank you for sharing your cray-cray with us this week for this extra long episode of AKA Jonescast. Hopefully, the next couple episodes won't be quite as long. We had a lot to unpack here. We're all back here, fresh off Infinity War. It's a crazy time for all humanity, and we're excited to be here. And I hope you will join us next week to share your cray-cray with us. Good night.